The autumn wind carried the scent of burning pine and wild berries as it swept through the cracks of our pack house windows. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching my breath create small clouds of fog that appeared and vanished with each exhale. Outside, preparations for the Harvest Moon Festival were underway, lanterns being strung between trees, tables arranged in long rows, and the smell of roasting meat filling the air as pack members moved with purpose and excitement. For everyone else, tonight promised celebration. For me, it meant another evening of sidelong glances and whispered comments. "Ilara, are you still not dressed?" My mother's voice came from behind me, tense with worry. "The ceremony begins in an hour." I turned slowly, tucking a strand of pale blonde hair behind my ear, the only feature I possessed that anyone ever complimented. "I'm not sure I should go." Mother's face softened, the lines around her eyes deepening as she approached. In her hands, she held a small wooden box inlaid with silver. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this tonight." The box felt heavier than its size suggested as she placed it in my palms. Inside rested a pendant, a small crescent moon carved from what appeared to be ivory, hanging from a delicate silver chain. "She told me once that true beauty isn't what others see, but what you carry within," Mother said, lifting the necklace and fastening it around my neck. This belonged to her mother, and her mother before that. Women in our family have worn it during important transitions. The pendant felt cool against my skin, a small weight that somehow steadied my breathing. "You can't hide forever, Ilara. Our pack needs every member tonight, especially with 3 neighboring packs attending." Her eyes carried a strange mix of determination and fear. "The Northern Alliance depends on these relationships." What she didn't say hung between us. That our pack's position was precarious, that our numbers had dwindled after the territory wars, and that I, as daughter to our pack's beta, was expected to represent our family with dignity, despite what everyone thought of my appearance. I nodded, resigned to my fate. "I'll be ready." After she left, I slipped into the dress laid out on my bed, deep forest green, simple but elegant. The mirror reflected what I already knew. A face too angular, eyes too wide set, a mouth too thin, not ugly in the conventional sense, but plain, forgettable, unremarkable in a world where female werewolves typically possessed striking beauty. Among our kind, appearance often signaled strength and fertility, valuable traits for potential mates. I lacked both that beauty and, as many suspected, the ability to shift fully. My partial transformations had been a source of shame since adolescence. The pendant, however, drew the eye, glowing softly in the fading light of my bedroom. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine wearing it proudly among the gathered packs. The sound of distant drums pulled me from my thoughts. The festival was beginning. The clearing had been transformed into an enchanted space, with fire pits casting golden light across hundreds of faces. Our pack members mingled with visitors, creating a sea of movement as people danced, ate, and strengthened alliances through conversation and ritual. I kept to the shadows, helping younger pack members with food service, a task that allowed me to participate without standing out. "Ilara, come help with the offering table," called Nina, one of the few pack members who treated me with genuine kindness. She beckoned from beside a long table laden with harvested goods, each family's contribution to honor the moon goddess and display our pack's prosperity. As I arranged bread loaves and fruit baskets, I became aware of a sudden hush falling over the gathering. The music faltered, conversations quieted, and all eyes turned toward the northern entrance to the clearing. They had arrived. The Shadow Ridge Pack, the most powerful of all northern packs, led by Alpha King Ronan Blackthorn. Even from a distance, Ronan's presence commanded attention. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the fluid grace of an apex predator, his dark hair catching the firelight. Behind him followed his inner circle, warriors and advisors, each exuding strength and confidence. "They say he's seeking a mate," whispered Nina, her eyes wide with excitement. "That's why he's touring the northern packs this season." My heart sank. Now the elaborate preparations made sense. Our alpha was hoping for an alliance through marriage, a common practice among werewolves. Every eligible female would be presented tonight, paraded before the visiting alpha like prized cattle. "Don't worry," Nina added, mistaking my expression. No one expects you to participate in that part. Her words, though not meant to hurt, stung all the same. I nodded stiffly and continued arranging the table, willing myself to become invisible. The formal greetings began, with our alpha welcoming the visitors and offering them places of honor at the main table. I watched from my station as wine flowed freely and stories were exchanged. The night wore on, and I relaxed slightly, believing I might escape notice entirely. Then came the announcement I had been dreading. As tradition dictates, we invite our unmated females to join in the moon dance, our alpha declared, his voice carrying across the clearing. May the goddess bless new bonds between our packs this harvest season. Young women from our pack stepped forward eagerly, dressed in their finest clothes, their faces glowing with anticipation. I remained frozen at my post, gripping the edge of the table. Ilara. My father's voice came from behind me, quiet but firm. As our pack's beta, his word was law, second only to the alphas. You will participate. Father, please. It's a matter of respect, he cut me off. Every unmated female must present herself. It's not about being chosen. It's about honoring traditions. Arguments died in my throat as I recognized the political necessity. Our pack couldn't afford any perceived slight. With leaden feet, I allowed myself to be guided toward the circle forming in the clearing's center. The whispers began immediately. Why is she even trying? Poor thing, doesn't know her place. You're too ugly for an alpha king. The last comment, barely disguised as a cough, came from Lydia, our alpha's niece, and the pack's recognized beauty. Her perfect features arranged themselves into a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. Don't worry, Ilara, just stay in the back. No one expects you to catch his attention. I felt heat rise to my cheeks as other women stifled laughter. My fingers found the moon pendant, clutching it like a lifeline as drums began to beat a rhythm that matched my racing heart. The dance began, a traditional circle that celebrated female energy, graceful movements meant to showcase strength and fertility. I followed along mechanically, keeping to the edge, focusing on the ground to avoid meeting anyone's gaze. When I finally dared to look up, my breath caught. Alpha Ronan stood directly before me, his dark eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made everything else fade away. His gaze dropped to my pendant, lingering there for a heartbeat before returning to my face. A strange expression crossed his features. Recognition, followed by something that looked almost like hope. Without breaking eye contact, he raised his hand, signaling for the music to stop. The sudden silence was deafening. Every eye in the clearing turned to us. You, he said, his deep voice sending tremors through my body. What is your name? The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet as I struggled to find my voice. Ilara, daughter of Beta Callum, I managed finally, my words barely audible. A murmur rippled through the crowd. From the corner of my eye, I saw Lydia's mouth drop open in shock, my father's face pale with apprehension, and my mother's eyes wide with disbelief. Alpha Ronan took a step closer, close enough that I could smell his scent. Pine and smoke and something wild that made my wolf stir beneath my skin. The pendant you wear, he said. Where did you get it? I touched it reflexively. It's a family heirloom. My grandmother gave it to my mother, who passed it to me. Something flickered in his eyes, a recognition that made no sense to me. Before he could speak again, a commotion broke out at the edge of the clearing. A scout burst through the trees, his face twisted with urgency. Rogue wolves, he shouted. At the northern border, they've broken through our defenses. The festive atmosphere shattered as warriors from both packs sprang into action. Alpha Ronan turned away, barking orders to his men, the moment between us forgotten in the face of immediate danger. As chaos erupted around me, people running in all directions, I stood frozen in place, the pendant warm against my skin. A small moon glowing with an inner light I'd never noticed before. Something was awakening inside me, responding to the pendant, to his gaze, to the danger threatening our packs. For the first time in my life, I felt my wolf rise not partially but fully to the surface, clawing to be released. And in that moment, as screams filled the air and fire pits cast long shadows across the clearing, I realized that everything was about to change. The next few moments passed in a blur of motion and sound. Warriors shifted into their wolf forms, massive creatures with gleaming teeth and powerful muscles, while pack members without fighting training were herded toward the safety of the main hall. I found myself caught in the flow, pushed along by the crowd, even as something inside me pulled in the opposite direction. "Ilara, come on." Nina grabbed my arm, her face pale with fear. "We need to get inside," but I couldn't move. The pendant against my chest pulsed with heat, and with each heartbeat, I felt a strange clarity washing over me. The chaos around me seemed to slow, sounds becoming distinct rather than a cacophony of panic. I could hear the snarls of approaching rogues, smell their unfamiliar scents cutting through the night air. Unwashed bodies, blood, and a strange chemical odor I couldn't place. "There's something wrong," I whispered, my eyes drawn to the tree line. "They're not just attacking randomly." Nina tugged harder. "What are you talking about? We need to—" "They're hurting us," I interrupted, suddenly understanding the pattern of the attack. The rogues weren't pushing from all sides, but driving everyone toward the main hall. "It's a trap." Before Nina could respond, I pulled free of her grip and turned toward my father, who was organizing a defensive line with other senior pack members. "Father, they want us in the hall." He glanced my way, confusion flickering across his face, but Alpha Ronan, standing nearby, caught my words and narrowed his eyes. He moved to my side with inhuman speed, his presence overwhelming at such close proximity. "Explain," he demanded, his voice a low growl. Words tumbled out of me, surprising in their clarity. The attack pattern. They're forcing us toward the hall, not trying to breach all borders. And there's a smell. Something chemical. Something wrong. Ronan inhaled deeply, his eyes widening slightly as he caught the scent I'd described. Without hesitation, he turned to his warriors. "Check the main hall. Now!" Two of his men broke away, racing toward the building where most of our pack members were already seeking shelter. I watched, heart pounding in my chest as they disappeared inside. Seconds later, one emerged, face grim. "Fire traps!" he shouted. "Multiple devices set to trigger." A cold realization washed over me. If everyone had crowded into the hall as planned, the resulting fire would have been catastrophic. Wolves trapped in a wooden building, panic ensuring maximum casualties. Alpha Ronan's expression darkened. They knew about the festival. This was planned. His eyes found mine, sharp with assessment. "How did you know?" I shook my head, unable to explain the sudden clarity that had come over me. "I just sensed it." There was no time for further questions. The rogues broke through the tree line. 15, maybe 20 wolves, larger than usual and moving with unnatural synchronicity. Their eyes gleamed red in the firelight, suggesting they were under the influence of moon rage, a dangerous condition that made wolves stronger but stripped them of reason. "Get behind me," Ronan ordered, but the command ignited something defiant in me. "No." The word surprised us both. "I can help." My father appeared at my side, his face a mask of protective fury. "Ilara, do as he says. I can sense them," I insisted. "Something's changed. I can feel things I couldn't before." My fingers clutched the pendant, which now felt like a living ember against my skin. A rogue wolf lunged toward a group of children being escorted to safety. Without thinking, I moved. The world blurred around me as I intercepted the attacker, my body responding with speed I'd never possessed before. The partial shift that had always been my limit suddenly gave way to something more complete. My nails extended into claws, my teeth sharpened to points, and strength flooded my limbs. I didn't fully transform, not like others could, but this hybrid form was new, powerful in its own right. I slashed at the rogue's face, drawing blood and forcing it back from the children. The wolf snarled, surprised by the resistance, then lunged again. This time, I sidestepped and raked my claws across its flank, using agility rather than brute strength. "Get them to the eastern clearing," I shouted to the caretaker, who stared at me in shock before gathering the children and fleeing in the direction I'd indicated. My momentary distraction cost me. The rogue recovered and sprang, its massive weight slamming into my chest and sending me sprawling onto the dirt. Hot breath hit my face as jaws snapped inches from my throat. I held the beast at bay with one arm, while frantically searching for leverage with my free hand. My fingers closed around something solid, a broken branch from one of the festival displays. With a desperate surge of strength, I drove the makeshift weapon into the rogue's side. It wasn't enough to kill, but the wolf yelped and recoiled, giving me the opening I needed to scramble away. Before it could attack again, a dark blur intercepted it. Alpha Ronin in his wolf form, massive and terrifying, his black fur gleaming like obsidian in the firelight. He made short work of the rogue, his movements so fast they were difficult to track with human eyes. Around us, the battle raged. Our warriors and Ronins fought side by side against the invaders, but something about the rogues' behavior continued to trouble me. They fought fiercely, but seemed to be holding back from killing blows, focusing instead on driving us in specific directions. They want something, I murmured, my enhanced senses scanning the clearing. Then I saw it, a smaller group breaking away from the main fight, heading not toward the hall but toward our pack's sacred grounds, where our historical artifacts and records were kept. Without hesitation, I pursued them, ignoring my father's shout behind me. 3 rogues, moving with purpose, disappeared into the shadows of the ancient oak grove that housed our pack's shrine. I followed, my newfound abilities allowing me to move silently through the undergrowth. The shrine was a simple stone structure, built around a natural spring that our ancestors had considered sacred. Inside, generations of pack history were preserved in scrolls and tokens, but the rogues weren't interested in our history. They headed straight for a small alcove at the back, where a singular item rested on a pedestal, an ancient dagger with a blade that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The moonless blade, a relic said to have been forged from a fallen star, capable of severing the bond between a werewolf and their inner wolf. In the wrong hands, it could strip an alpha of their power, or render an entire pack vulnerable to domination. One of the rogues shifted partially back to human form, enough to use hands while maintaining wolf strength. He reached for the dagger, and something in me snapped. "Stop!" The word tore from my throat, carrying a resonance I'd never heard in my own voice. The rogues whirled, snarling at the interruption. The one reaching for the dagger hesitated, his eyes widening as they fixed on my pendant. Recognition flashed across his features, followed by what looked strangely like fear. "Moon Witch," he spat, the words garbled through partially transformed vocal cords. I had no idea what he meant, but I didn't hesitate to use his momentary uncertainty. I launched myself forward, claws extended. The rogues scattered, momentarily thrown by my aggression. I positioned myself between them and the dagger, baring my teeth in warning. "You won't take it," I growled, feeling power surge through me, centered around the pendant. The lead rogue recovered his composure, lips curling in a vicious smile. "We don't need to take it," he said, his voice disturbingly human despite his monstrous appearance. "We just need to use it." They attacked simultaneously, coordinating with unnatural precision. I dodged the first, slashed at the second, but the third caught me across the back with razor-sharp claws. Pain blazed along my spine, but the pendant flared in response, sending warmth through my veins that dulled the agony to a manageable ache. I spun, keeping all 3 in my field of vision, knowing I couldn't defeat them alone, but determined to delay them until help arrived. One feinted left while another lunged right, forcing me to divide my attention. The third used the distraction to circle behind me, aiming for the pedestal. In desperation, I grabbed the moonless blade myself, feeling a cold shock travel up my arm as my fingers closed around the hilt. The dagger seemed to whisper against my skin, ancient and hungry. I brandished it toward the rogues, who pulled up short, eyeing the weapon with obvious desire and equally obvious fear. "Back," I warned, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. The lead rogue's eyes darted between my face, the pendant, and the dagger. "You don't know what you're holding," he said. "What you are." "I know enough to stop you," I replied, though his words sent a chill through me. A howl from outside the shrine interrupted our standoff. Reinforcements were coming. The rogues exchanged glances, communicating silently in that unnerving way they had. The leader snarled in frustration. "This isn't over, Moon Witch. He'll want you alive now that you've revealed yourself." Before I could question who he was, they turned and fled, moving with impossible speed through an opening in the shrine's rear wall that I hadn't noticed before. I started to pursue them, but the wound on my back flared with pain, reminding me of my limitations. Moments later, Alpha Ronin burst into the shrine, followed by my father and 2 warriors. They took in the scene, me standing alone, clutching the moonless blade, blood seeping through the back of my torn dress. "Alara!" My father rushed to my side, his face contorted with worry. "What were you thinking?" "They were after the blade," I explained, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me lightheaded. I couldn't let them take it. Ronan approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the dagger in my hand. "Few can touch that blade without consequences," he said quietly. "It rejects most who try." I looked down at the weapon, realizing with a start that the whispers I'd felt upon first touching it had faded to a dull hum, almost comfortable against my skin. It accepted me, as did the pendant, Ronan observed, his expression unreadable. "Do you understand what that means?" Before I could answer, the room tilted around me, the loss of blood finally taking its toll. The dagger slipped from my fingers, caught by Ronan before it could hit the ground. As he reached for me, I saw strange markings appearing on my wrists, silvery lines that crawled up my arms like frost on glass. "What's happening to me?" I whispered, watching the patterns spread across my skin. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was Alpha Ronan's face, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. His lips formed words I couldn't hear, but somehow I understood their meaning. "Your awakening." I dreamed of moonlight, pure silver rays that poured like liquid through my veins, burning away imperfections and reshaping me from within. Voices echoed around me, some familiar, others ancient and unknown. Bloodline was thought to be lost. Couldn't have known what she carried. Dangerous to move her now. I floated through these fragments, unable to grasp their meaning, until a single voice cut through the haze. Deep, commanding, yet gentle in a way that called to something primal within me. "Alara, come back now." My eyes snapped open. I lay on a bed of soft furs in an unfamiliar room, stone walls glowing with the warm light of dozens of candles. My body felt strange, lighter somehow, yet more solid, as if I finally occupied the exact space I was meant to fill. The pain from my wounds had dulled to a distant memory. Alpha Ronin sat beside me, his imposing frame somehow fitting perfectly in the small wooden chair. His dark eyes studied me with an intensity that would have made me shrink away only a day before. Now, I met his gaze steadily. "Where am I?" My voice sounded different, clearer, with a resonance that hadn't been there before. "The sacred healing chamber beneath your pack's shrine," he answered. "No one has used it in generations, but your mother remembered its existence." He leaned forward slightly. "How do you feel?" I took inventory of my body, noting the strange markings that now decorated my arms like intricate silver tattoos. Different, stronger. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "More myself?" He nodded as if this made perfect sense. "The pendant activated something that was dormant in your blood. The moonless blade confirmed it." His eyes traveled to my neck, where the crescent moon pendant still rested. "You're of the lunar bloodline." The words meant nothing to me, but they sent a shiver of recognition through my body. "What does that mean?" "It means," came a new voice from the doorway, "that everything we believed about you was wrong." My mother entered, carrying a small wooden chest. Behind her followed my father, his usual confident stance replaced by something almost reverent. The way they looked at me, a mixture of awe and uncertainty, made my stomach tighten with unease. "Mother?" She set the chest at the foot of my bed. "When your grandmother gave me the pendant, she told me it was just a family heirloom, meant to be passed down to daughters in our line. But she also made me promise to give it to you specifically on the night of a harvest moon." She touched the pendant gently. I never questioned why. Alpha Ronin stood, his height making the chamber feel suddenly smaller. The lunar bloodline was thought to be extinct for centuries. They were moon priestesses, women who could channel lunar energy, who stood as mediators between packs, whose judgment was respected by all wolves. His eyes never left mine as he spoke. They were healers, peacekeepers, and when necessary, warriors unlike any other. My father cleared his throat. In the old wars, they were targeted first because of their power. The last known moon priestess died protecting the northern packs from southern invaders 200 years ago. He looked at me with new eyes, or so we thought. But I've never had power, I protested. I couldn't even shift properly until last night. Because it was dormant, Ronan explained. The pendant is a catalyst, meant to awaken abilities at the right time. And the moonless blade. He trailed off, exchanging a glance with my father. The blade tests worthiness, my father continued. It burns those who aren't meant to wield it. The fact that you could hold it confirms what the pendant awakened. I sat up slowly, noticing for the first time that I was wearing a simple white shift instead of my torn festival dress. The rogue called me Moon Witch. He seemed afraid when he saw the pendant. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. They recognized what you were before we did. Which means whoever sent them knows about the lunar bloodline, Ronan added grimly. And now they know about you. The implications settled over the room like a heavy cloud. I looked down at my hands, at the silver patterns that decorated my skin, trying to reconcile who I'd been yesterday with what they were telling me today. All my life, I'd been the plain one, the weak one, the one who couldn't shift properly. Now they looked at me as if I were something precious and rare. I need to see, I said suddenly, swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. Alara, you should rest, my mother began, but I was already standing, surprised by the steadiness in my legs. I need to see myself, I insisted. Please. My father nodded reluctantly and gestured toward a polished silver mirror hanging on the far wall. I approached it slowly, my heart hammering in my chest, uncertain what I would find reflected back at me. The woman in the mirror was both familiar and a stranger. My face had transformed subtly. Cheekbones more defined, lips fuller, eyes brighter with flecks of silver in their depths. My pale blonde hair seemed to glow with inner light, falling in perfect waves past my shoulders. The awkward angles that had defined me had softened into graceful lines, as if my body had finally settled into its intended form. But the most striking changes were the silver markings that swirled across my skin like delicate frost patterns, and an indefinable quality of presence that emanated from me. An inner luminescence that seemed to push against the boundaries of my physical form. This is, I whispered, unable to finish the thought. The true you, Ronan said, his reflection appearing behind mine in the mirror. The you that was always there, hidden beneath the surface. Our eyes met in the reflection, and something passed between us, a recognition, a pull that made my newly awakened wolf stir beneath my skin. I turned to face him directly, suddenly aware of how close he stood, of the heat that radiated from his powerful frame. "Why are you here?" I asked, the question encompassing more than his presence in this chamber. Why would an alpha king concern himself with a beta's daughter from a small northern pack? Something like respect flickered in his eyes at my directness. I've been searching for the lunar bloodline for years. There were signs, prophecies that suggested a daughter of the moon would rise again when the packs faced their greatest threat. His voice lowered. I never expected to find you here, or that the pendant would activate during my visit. But when I saw it around your neck, I knew. Knew what? That everything was about to change. He echoed my own thoughts from the night before with such precision that I wondered if some connection had already formed between us. A commotion from above interrupted the moment. Raised voices and the sound of hurried footsteps. Seconds later, Nina burst into the chamber, her usual cheerfulness replaced by urgent fear. "They're back," she gasped. "The rogues, dozens of them this time. They've surrounded the territory and demanded that we hand over the Moon Witch by sunset, or they'll attack with full force." My father immediately shifted into his role as beta, issuing orders for defensive positions and evacuation protocols. My mother moved to my side, protective instinct radiating from her. "They can't have her," she said fiercely. Alpha Ronan's expression darkened. "No, they can't. But we need to know who they're working for." He turned to me, his gaze intense. This isn't just about the moonless blade anymore. They want you." "Why?" I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer. "Because whoever controls a moon priestess controls the balance of power among all packs," he replied. "Your abilities, which will only grow stronger as you learn to use them, could tip the scales in territorial disputes, challenge established hierarchies, even influence the outcome of wars." "But I don't know how to use any abilities," I protested. "I can barely control the partial shift I managed last night." Ronan's lips curved into a slight smile. "You sensed the trap when no one else did. You protected the moonless blade on instinct. Your body is already healing at an accelerated rate." He gestured to my back, where the deep claw wounds had faded to thin pink lines. "You're capable of more than you realize." A thought occurred to me then, one that made my blood run cold. The festival. All those people gathered in one place. What if the attack wasn't just about the blade or finding me? What if it was a test, to see if rumors of a moon priestess were true? The chamber fell silent as everyone considered the implications. "If that's the case," my father said slowly, "then someone has been watching us for some time, waiting for signs, and now they have confirmation," Ronan added grimly. Nina, who had been listening with wide eyes, stepped forward. "There's something else. The rogues. They're not just random wolves. Some of our warriors recognized a few of them from the southern territories." This news sent a visible shock through the adults in the room. The southern territories had maintained an uneasy peace with the northern packs since the last Great War, but tensions had been simmering for years over resource disputes and boundary lines. "If the South has found a way to induce moon rage in their soldiers," my father said, "and they're now hunting for a moon priestess, then they're preparing for war," Ronan finished, "and they want to eliminate any advantage we might have." All eyes turned to me, and the weight of their expectations pressed down like a physical force. Yesterday, I had been invisible. Today, I was apparently the key to the survival of the northern packs. "I can't be what you need me to be," I said quietly, panic rising in my chest. "I don't know how." Ronan stepped closer, his presence simultaneously intimidating and reassuring. "You don't have to know yet. You just have to be willing to try." He held out his hand. "Come with me to Shadow Ridge. My pack can protect you while you learn to control your abilities. We have archives that might contain information about the lunar bloodline, training methods, historical accounts. You want to take her away?" My mother's voice cracked with emotion. "I want to keep her safe," Ronan countered, "and help her become what she's meant to be." "And if I refuse?" I asked, needing to know if I had a choice. His expression softened slightly. "Then we stay and fight alongside your pack. But the risk is greater here, and time is something we may not have much of." I looked around the chamber, at my parents' worried faces, at Nina's fear, at the stone walls that had witnessed generations of my pack's history. Everything familiar was changing too quickly, spinning beyond my control. But beneath the fear, a new sensation burned: determination, purpose. A sense that for the first time, I might have a role that mattered. "I need to speak with Alpha Ronan alone," I said, surprising myself with the authority in my voice. My parents exchanged glances but nodded reluctantly. They left the chamber with Nina, casting concerned looks over their shoulders as they departed. When the heavy wooden door closed behind them, I turned to face the Alpha King directly. "You knew what the pendant was the moment you saw it. That's why you approached me during the dance." He nodded, making no attempt to deny it. "I've been searching for signs of the lunar bloodline for 3 years, ever since our seers began having visions of renewed conflict with the South. And now that you've found me?" I held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated despite the power that radiated from him. "What am I to you? A weapon? A political advantage?" Something flashed in his eyes, anger perhaps, or surprise at my bluntness. "You're the last of a sacred bloodline that once balanced power between all wolves. You're potentially the difference between peace and war." He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. "And you're something I never expected to find." "What's that?" I whispered, my heart pounding as he reached out to touch the pendant at my throat. "A missing piece," he said softly. "There are prophecies about the Moon Priestess and the Shadow King finding each other in times of greatest need. I dismissed them as legends until I saw you." The pendant warmed at his touch, and with it, Something inside me responded, a recognition that went beyond conscious thought. In his eyes, I saw not just the calculated interest of an alpha seeking advantage, but something deeper, more personal. "I'll go with you," I decided, the words feeling right as they left my lips, but not just as something to be protected or used. If I truly am what you believe, then I need to learn, to understand what that means. I straightened my shoulders. "And I need you to see me as an ally, not a possession." A smile, genuine and warm, transformed his usually stern features. "I wouldn't dare see you as anything less, a Lara of the lunar bloodline." He offered his hand again, "Especially now that I've seen what you're becoming." As our fingers touched, the silver markings on my skin glowed briefly, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of what might be possible. Strength I'd never imagined, a future I'd never dared to hope for, and a connection to this intimidating man that seemed written in the stars themselves. Preparations for our departure happened with dizzying speed. By midday, a plan had been formulated. While Ronan's warriors created a diversion at the southern border, a smaller group, including Ronan, myself, and select guards, would slip away through the underground tunnel network that connected the major northern pack territories. The rogues would expect us to flee north or west, not to use the ancient passages beneath the mountains. My mother helped me dress in practical traveling clothes, her fingers lingering as she braided my now luminous hair. "I always knew you were special," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Just not like this. I'm still me," I assured her, though I wasn't entirely certain that was true anymore. The person reflected in mirrors now was someone I was still getting to know. Someone with power humming beneath her skin and strange knowledge surfacing in her mind like forgotten memories. "Take this." She pressed a small leather-bound book into my hands. "Your grandmother's journal. She never let me read it. Said it wasn't meant for my eyes. Perhaps it was meant for yours all along." I tucked the precious book into my travel pack, alongside the few personal belongings I'd chosen to bring. The pendant remained around my neck, a constant warm presence that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of my heart. My father entered the room, his face solemn. "It's time." As we made our way to the shrine where the tunnel entrance lay hidden, pack members stopped to watch me pass. Their expressions ranged from awe to fear to something like reverence. Word had spread quickly about what had happened, about what I was. Children peeked from behind their parents' legs, pointing at the silver markings visible on my hands and neck. "Is it true?" one brave little girl asked as I passed. "Are you really a moon lady?" I knelt to her level, surprised when she didn't shy away. "I'm learning what that means," I answered honestly, "but I'll always be part of this pack no matter what." She nodded solemnly before her mother pulled her back, murmuring apologies. I continued on, the weight of expectations pressing down with each step. At the shrine, Alpha Ronan waited with 4 of his most trusted warriors. His eyes tracked my approach, something unreadable flickering in their depths. Beside him stood the moonless blade in its sheath, ready for transport to Shadow Ridge where it could be better protected. "The diversion begins in 10 minutes, he said, his voice low and controlled. "We move as soon as we receive word." I nodded, my newly enhanced senses already picking up the tension in the air, the distant sounds of preparation. My father pulled me into a tight embrace. "Remember who you are," he whispered fiercely. "Not just what you've become, but who you've always been. Strong, observant, compassionate." "I will," I promised, fighting back tears. A scout burst into the shrine, breathing hard. "The diversion is working. They're moving to the southern border in force." "Now!" Ronan commanded, and one of his warriors moved to the back wall of the shrine, pressing a sequence of stones that caused a hidden door to slide open with a grinding sound of ancient mechanisms. Cool air rushed out from the dark passage beyond. Ronan activated a modern electric lantern, the harsh light incongruous against the ancient stonework. He nodded to me. "Stay close." With one last look at my parents, I stepped into the tunnel, leaving behind the only life I had ever known. The tunnels were a marvel, an extensive network carved through the mountains centuries ago, reinforced with stonework that bore the same strange symbols that now decorated my skin. As we walked, I found myself trailing my fingers along the walls, feeling a connection to the ancient passages that went beyond mere familiarity. Your ancestors helped create these tunnels, Ronan explained, noticing my fascination. Moon priestesses could sense the natural weaknesses in the rock, the places where the earth would allow passage. I can feel it, I admitted, surprised by my own certainty. Almost like the mountain is breathing. One of Ronan's warriors, Darius, I'd learned his name was, exchanged glances with his alpha. The old stories mention this. They said moon priestesses could speak to the land itself. I might have dismissed such talk as superstition yesterday, but now I could feel the truth of it in my bones. The mountain had a presence, ancient and slow. Not a consciousness exactly, but not merely inert matter either. We walked for hours, the tunnels sometimes narrowing until we had to proceed single file, other times opening into vast chambers where underground springs created pools of crystalline water. During a brief rest in one such chamber, I took the opportunity to open my grandmother's journal. The first pages contained what appeared to be family records, births, deaths, marriages. Then, halfway through, the writing changed, becoming more secretive, coded with symbols that matched those on the tunnel walls. To my astonishment, I found I could understand them, the meanings surfacing in my mind without conscious translation. The gift slumbers, waiting for the right daughter to awaken it. Each generation, the blood thins, but the moon remembers. When darkness rises again, the pendant will call to she who can bear its light. I traced the words with my finger, a chill running down my spine. How long had my grandmother known? How many generations had carried this secret, waiting? What does it say? Ronan's voice startled me. He had approached silently, moving with the grace that seemed effortless to him. I hesitated before showing him the page. My grandmother knew. They all knew, passing down the knowledge, waiting for the right time. He studied the symbols. Can you read this? Somehow, yes. I turned the page, revealing more of the strange script. It speaks of training exercises, ways to channel the moon's energy. I looked up at him. She left this for me to find. Something softened in Ronan's expression. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. Your line has protected this knowledge for generations, keeping it alive until it was needed again. He settled beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. What else does it say? Before I could answer, Darius returned from scouting ahead, his expression grim. Alpha, there's trouble. Signs of recent passage in the tunnels ahead. Multiple individuals within the last day. The relaxed atmosphere vanished instantly. Ronan stood, his body tensing with alertness. The rogues shouldn't know about these tunnels. No one outside the northern packs should, I agreed, closing the journal and returning it to my pack. Unless someone betrayed the knowledge, Ronan finished, his voice hardening. We continued more cautiously now, Darius taking point with another warrior named Kai bringing up the rear. I found myself in the middle of our group, flanked by Ronan and his remaining 2 guards. The easy conversation of earlier had been replaced by tense silence, broken only by the soft sounds of our breathing and footfalls. My newly heightened senses stretched ahead, seeking any sign of danger. A faint scent caught my attention. The same chemical odor I'd noticed during the festival attack. They were here, I whispered to Ronan. Recently. He nodded, having detected it himself. The question is whether they still are, or if they've moved on. We reached a junction where the tunnel split into 3 branches. Darius examined the ground carefully before reporting back. Tracks lead down all 3 paths. They're trying to confuse us, or they've split up. Ronan considered our options. The left tunnel leads most directly to Shadow Ridge. The middle eventually connects to Wolf's Head territory, and the right circles back toward the mountains. I closed my eyes, trying to focus on the strange awareness that had been growing inside me. The pendant warmed against my skin, and I felt drawn to the right-hand tunnel, not because it was safe, but because something important waited there. The right path, I said, opening my eyes to find everyone watching me. There's something... I can't explain it, but we need to go that way. Darius looked skeptical. Alpha, that's the longest route to Shadow Ridge. If the rogues are pursuing us, we follow her instincts, Ronan interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. The lunar bloodline is awakening in her. We'd be fools to ignore its guidance. The right-hand tunnel narrowed significantly after a few hundred yards, forcing us to proceed single file. The air grew cooler, with a mineral scent suggesting we were traveling deeper into the mountain. After nearly an hour of steady walking, the tunnel opened suddenly into a vast cavern, its ceiling so high that our lights couldn't illuminate it fully. In the center of the cavern stood a circular pool of water, perfectly still, reflecting like a mirror. Around it, stone columns rose from floor to ceiling, each carved with the same symbols that marked the tunnel walls and my own skin. The moon pool. Ronan breathed, awe evident in his voice. It's supposed to be a legend. I approached the water's edge, drawn by an irresistible pull. The pool glowed with soft blue light that seemed to emanate from its depths. As I knelt beside it, my reflection showed not just my face, but flashes of other women, generations of moon priestesses, their features similar to mine in subtle ways. "They're all here," I whispered. "The knowledge, the memories." Before anyone could respond, a voice echoed from the far side of the cavern. As expected, the newly awakened witch seeks the pool. We spun to face the threat. 5 figures emerged from the shadows, 3 in partial wolf form and 2 fully human. Their leader, a tall man with silver-streaked black hair and cold blue eyes, stepped forward. "Nathaniel Drake," Ronan growled, recognition and hatred mingling in his voice. "Southern Territory." The man smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Alpha King Ronan, how convenient to find you escorting our prize personally." I felt Ronan shift slightly, positioning himself between me and the newcomers. "She's under my protection." "She's under no one's protection but her own," I corrected, stepping up beside him. The pendant burned hot against my skin, responding to the threat. Nathaniel's gaze fixed on me, his expression calculating. "So the rumors are true. The lunar bloodline survived." His eyes traveled to my pendant, then to the markings on my skin, not fully awakened yet, but close. "How fascinating. What do you want?" I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. "The same thing every alpha wants, my dear. Power. Security for my pack. Advantage over my enemies." He gestured casually. "The moon priestesses once kept balance between territories, but balance means stagnation. Progress requires disruption." "You sent the rogues," Ronan said. "You've been experimenting with moon rage." Nathaniel inclined his head in acknowledgement. "A useful tool. Makes wolves stronger, more aggressive, and wonderfully obedient when properly conditioned." His cold smile returned, but nothing compared to what a moon priestess could offer, especially one bonded to the right alpha. The implication chilled my blood. "I'm not a tool to be used." "Everyone is a tool, my dear. The question is whether you'll be used for your purpose or wasted on—" His gaze flicked dismissively to Ronan. "Outdated ideals of balance and cooperation." His words triggered something in me. A flash of understanding. The journal, the symbols, the pool, they were all connected. The lunar bloodline didn't exist to serve any alpha, but to maintain harmony between all packs, to prevent exactly the kind of power-hungry aggression that Nathaniel represented. The pendant pulsed, and with it, knowledge flooded my mind. Techniques, words of power, the true nature of my abilities. I stepped forward, away from Ronan's protective stance. "You're right about one thing," I said, my voice taking on the resonance I'd noticed earlier. "I do have a purpose." I raised my hand toward the pool, instinctively drawing on its power. The water began to glow more intensely, ripples spreading from the center though nothing had touched its surface. The silver markings on my skin brightened in response, and I felt energy coursing through me like liquid moonlight. Nathaniel's confident expression faltered. "Restrain her." His wolves lunged forward, but too late. I spoke words I hadn't known I possessed. Ancient words of protection and boundary. The air between us shimmered, and the attackers slammed into an invisible barrier, yelping in surprise and pain. "You cannot touch what the moon has claimed," I said, the words flowing through me from some ancestral memory, "nor can you bend its light to shadow." The barrier shimmered between us, translucent, yet impenetrable. Nathaniel's wolves prowled along its edge, testing for weaknesses while their leader watched with narrowed eyes. "Impressive for one so newly awakened," he conceded, his calm voice belying the tension in his posture. "But how long can you maintain it? Energy has its limits, even lunar energy." He was right. Already I could feel the strain of holding the barrier, a subtle drain on my newfound strength. The knowledge that had flowed into me moments ago was still fragmented, instinctive rather than mastered. Ronan moved to my side, his presence solid and reassuring. "We don't need long," he said, his voice pitched for Nathaniel alone. "My pack is already on the move. Did you think I wouldn't send word ahead when we discovered the tunnels had been compromised?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Nathaniel's face. "You're bluffing. There's no way to communicate from inside these mountains." "There are always ways for those who know the old paths," Ronan replied, with dangerous softness. "The question is whether you're willing to risk open war with all northern territories for your ambition." I sensed Ronan's strategy, playing for time, sowing doubt, but Nathaniel was no fool. His eyes darted between us, calculating. "Let me offer an alternative," Nathaniel said smoothly. "Join me willingly, Moon Priestess. Your power, combined with Southern Territory resources, could reshape werewolf society. No more territorial disputes, no more pack hierarchies, just one united force." "United under you," I observed. He smiled thinly. "Someone must lead. I've spent years preparing for this moment, studying the old ways, gathering strength. Ronan clings to traditions that keep our kind divided and weak." "You mistake diversity for weakness," Ronan countered. "Each pack has its own strengths, its own connection to the land they protect." "Romantic nonsense," Nathaniel dismissed. "Efficiency requires centralization." As they argued, I felt the moon pool's energy shift behind me. The water's glow intensified, reaching up in tendrils of light that swirled around the cavern. Neither Nathaniel nor his wolves seemed to notice, but Ronan's eyes widened slightly as he followed my gaze. Understanding passed between us without words. Whatever was happening, we needed to let it unfold. I needed to keep Nathaniel talking. "And what happens to those who don't fit your vision?" I asked, genuine curiosity mixing with my stalling tactic. "Those like me, who were considered weak or flawed until circumstances revealed otherwise." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Natural selection has always been our way. The strong survive, the weak serve or perish. That's not what the lunar bloodline stands for," I said, certainty filling me as more knowledge surfaced in my mind. "We exist precisely to prevent the strong from crushing the weak, to ensure balance between all wolves, a balance that has failed repeatedly throughout history," he snapped. "Your precious lunar bloodline didn't prevent the Great Wars, didn't stop the Southern Territories from being pushed into inferior lands with scarce resources." Behind me, the light from the pool had formed a spiraling column that reached toward the cavern ceiling. The air grew thick with energy that raised the hair on my arms. My barrier wavered as my attention divided. Nathaniel noticed. "Your concentration is slipping, Moon Witch. Perhaps you're not as powerful as legends suggest." He nodded to his wolves, who tensed to attack the moment my protection failed. I fought to maintain the barrier, while simultaneously trying to understand what the pool was doing. This wasn't my power. It was something else entirely, something ancient responding to my presence. "Ilara," Ronan murmured, his hand finding mine. "Trust it." The simple touch sent a jolt through me. Not just physical attraction, but a deeper connection. The moment our skin made contact, the silver markings on my arm extended, reaching out to twine with similar patterns that suddenly appeared on Ronan's wrist. We both gasped at the sensation. The column of light from the pool exploded outward, flooding the cavern with blinding radiance. I instinctively dropped the barrier, no longer needing it as the light washed over us all. Nathaniel and his wolves cried out, shielding their eyes. But the light didn't hurt me or Ronan or his warriors. Instead, it felt like a gentle caress, a recognition. When the light receded, the cavern had transformed. The walls glowed with activated symbols, and the pool's surface rippled with images. Territories, packs, bloodlines all connected in an intricate web of relationships. And I could see it all. Every connection, every history, every thread of kinship that bound the werewolf world together. I understood with sudden clarity that this was the true power of the lunar bloodline, not combat magic or dominance, but the ability to perceive and maintain the delicate balance between all wolves. "This is what you fear," I said to Nathaniel, who stood paralyzed by the display. "Not that I'll fight you, but that I'll reveal you, that I'll show everyone how we're all connected, how no pack thrives truly when others suffer." The pool's surface shifted, focusing on the southern territories, showing not just the resource challenges Nathaniel had mentioned, but also the ways his policies had concentrated wealth among a select few, leaving many of his own people struggling. "Your pack doesn't need to conquer to prosper," I continued, the knowledge flowing through me. The old alliances included resource sharing, trade routes, seasonal migrations that benefited all. "Lies," Nathaniel hissed, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. His wolves looked confused, some of them staring at the pool with something like longing in their eyes. "Not lies, memory." I stepped closer to the pool, pulling Ronan with me, our joined hands maintaining the connection that had somehow amplified the pool's power. "This is what the moon priestesses preserved, the collective memory of our kind, the wisdom of generations." Nathaniel's expression contorted with rage. "Enough!" He began to shift, his body twisting into the massive form of an alpha wolf, larger than normal, with unnatural red gleaming in his eyes. The chemical scent intensified, confirming my suspicion that he had been experimenting with moon rage on himself. But before he could attack, one of his own wolves moved to stand between us. "Alpha, wait," the wolf said, his voice distorted by his partial transformation. "Look at the pool. It shows the truth of what she says." "Traitor," Nathaniel snarled, lunging at his subordinate. I reacted instinctively, drawing on the pool's energy and my own awakened abilities. Silver light erupted from my free hand, encircling Nathaniel in bands of luminous energy that constricted his movement. He fought against the bonds, his enhanced strength testing my control. "I don't want to hurt you," I told him honestly, "but I won't let you hurt others either." The effort of restraining him drained me rapidly. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I struggled to maintain the bonds. Ronan squeezed my hand, and somehow his strength flowed into me, reinforcing my own. "The Shadow King and the Moon Priestess," whispered Darius from behind us. "The prophecy." Nathaniel's struggles weakened as the moon rage began to fade from his system. The pool's light seemed to purify him somehow, drawing out the chemical influence that had twisted his mind. As the red glow faded from his eyes, confusion replaced rage. What's happening to me?" he gasped, his body reverting to human form. "The pool is cleansing you," I explained, sensing the process rather than actually seeing it. "The chemicals you've been using to enhance your power, they've been affecting your judgment, feeding your most aggressive instincts." His wolves approached cautiously, one of them addressing Ronan. "Alpha King, many in the southern territories have noticed the change in him. The experiment started as a way to strengthen our defenses, but something went wrong. Addiction," Ronan surmised. The rage enhancement became addictive, clouding his thinking. I nodded, feeling the truth of it through the pool's connection. He believed he was acting for his pack's benefit, but the chemicals twisted his motives into something darker. As Nathaniel collapsed to his knees, the silver bonds dissipating, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. Maintaining the connection to the pool while restraining him had depleted my newly awakened powers. Ronan supported me as my knees buckled. "Easy," he murmured. "You've done more in one day than most moon priestesses did after years of training." The pool's brilliance dimmed to a gentle glow. The immediate danger passed. Nathaniel's wolves gathered around their alpha, uncertainty in their postures. "What happens now?" asked the one who had stood against Nathaniel. Ronan looked to me, surprising me with his deference. "That depends on the moon priestess." All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of the moment, my first true test as whatever I was becoming. I studied Nathaniel, seeing not just the power-hungry alpha, but the desperate leader who had taken a dangerous path believing it was the only way to protect his people. "He needs healing," I said finally. and the southern territories need support, not conquest. I turned to Ronan. The northern packs have prospered while the south has struggled. Perhaps it's time to revisit the old alliances, the resource sharing that once benefited all territories. Ronan's expression was thoughtful. Such an agreement would require trust on both sides, and enforcement, which is where a moon priestess might be useful, I suggested. A neutral party with the ability to see connections, to mediate disputes before they escalate to conflict. The wolf who had defended us stepped forward. I am Caleb, Beta to Alpha Nathaniel. If what the pool showed is true, many in our territory would welcome such an arrangement. He glanced at his defeated Alpha. We've followed him into increasingly dangerous territory out of loyalty, but many have questioned the path we're on. Darius approached, his initial skepticism replaced by something like respect as he addressed me. The journey to Shadow Ridge will take another day through these tunnels. Can you maintain your strength until then? I nodded, though uncertainty flickered through me. My abilities were still unpredictable, my knowledge incomplete. But the journal in my pack, the pool's revelations, and the instincts awakening inside me all pointed to the same truth. This was my purpose. Not to serve any one alpha or pack, but to restore balance to all. We'll take Nathaniel with us, Ronan decided. Once the moon rage is fully cleansed from his system, perhaps rational negotiations can begin. He turned to Caleb. Return to your territory. Tell your people what you've witnessed here. When your alpha is well enough to speak for himself, we will contact you. Caleb hesitated. And the moon priestess? Will she truly stand as a neutral party, not aligned with Shadow Ridge alone? I felt the question's importance, my first test of independence. Ronan's hand still held mine, our markings still intertwined in a way that suggested a connection deeper than political alliance. But I understood now that my role transcended even that bond. I will serve all packs equally, I promised. That is the oath of the lunar bloodline. As we prepared to continue our journey, the pool's light dimmed further, returning to its dormant state, but the knowledge it had awakened remained, along with a certainty that had replaced my lifelong insecurity. Ronan walked beside me as we left the cavern, Darius and another warrior supporting the weakened Nathaniel between them. What you did back there, Ronan said quietly. Few could have managed it, especially so newly awakened. I had help, I reminded him, glancing at our hands where the markings had begun to fade but not disappear entirely. The prophecy speaks of balance, he replied. The Shadow King's strength complementing the Moon Priestess's insight. Neither complete without the other. I considered this as we walked, reflecting on how quickly life had changed. Days ago, I had been the plain, forgettable daughter of a beta, believing myself deficient and unworthy. Now I walked beside one of the most powerful alphas in the territories, my own abilities awakening, my path suddenly clear. What are you thinking? Ronan asked after a while, his deep voice gentle. I smiled, touching the pendant that had started everything. About what they said at the festival. You're too ugly for an alpha king. They were wrong, he stated simply. No, I corrected him. They just couldn't see what was beneath the surface. Neither could I. I met his gaze steadily. But now we all can. As we continued through the ancient tunnels toward Shadow Ridge, and whatever future awaited us, I felt the pendant warm against my skin. No longer activating anything, but simply acknowledging what had already awakened. The path ahead would not be easy, the challenges of uniting divided territories enormous, but for the first time in my life, I walked with confidence, knowing that what others had seen as flaws were actually the foundations of my strength. And beside me walked the alpha whose power complemented my own, not through dominance but through balance. Together, we would forge something new from the ancient wisdom of our kinds, healing old wounds and creating bonds stronger than either of us could achieve alone. The transformation that had begun with a pendant on a harvest night was complete, but the true journey was only beginning.